So the other day, I made a video talking about the second Megamind film that had been released on Peacock, and really that video just served as a place for me to vent about how much I hated that movie in almost every respect. Like, you can watch that video if you want the full rundown, but in summary, it sucked. It sucked hard. The voice acting was not up to snuff with what was in the first film. They didn't even bring back the OG actors. The jokes were tired, character decisions were baffling, the animation, whilst I personally didn't mind it, apparently more people hated it, the story was bad. It was slow and plodding with not much to draw you in, lots of downtime where nothing happens except for us listening to budget Megamind make lame jokes and act like an utter buffoon. Not in a good way. And yeah, it just wasn't good, and unsurprisingly got a lot of hate and a lot of mockery online. And it currently has a 0% critical score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 10% audience score. Absolutely terrible. And whilst I'm sure it got a lot of views for Peacock, are they the right type of views? I can't help but suspect that those who are watching it at this point are hate watching it, or just have morbid curiosity. All in all, it seems like an unmitigated disaster for DreamWorks as a whole, and I suspect a lot of that came down to budget constraints, but, it's not my problem. But I guess that's why it looks cheap and why they brought back nobody from the OG cast. And on top of that, I expected they had a fresh creative team. The director is not the OG. The first guy went on to work on other DreamWorks projects. And he's been replaced with some random. And I'll be honest, dude seems like he might have made a couple of hit shows back in the day, but he's now washed. And the writers, well, I thought the screenwriters would have to be new as well, because they just didn't seem to understand any of the characters. But it turns out that these are, in fact, the guys that wrote Megamind to begin with, so either they too are now washed, or since they don't have Wikipedia pages, I suspect that they wrote one good movie, but it was a fluke, and since then they've done nothing of value. And thus, when they came back for more Megamind, they've not been able to replicate that success, and instead they made a sad flanderization of the character and the world instead. Oh, and on top of that, they backtrack on some of the story. Like, full disclosure on this one, I'm still pissed off that Megamind and Roxanne are just friends. Or just complicated. Ugh, what the hell? What is this? But yeah, can't get too worked up just yet, because either way, watching the movie was pain. If we were still in that era, it would have been straight to video and never talked about again. But yeah, in this era of streaming, where they act like straight to streaming is on the same level of a theatrical release, because let's be real, sometimes it is, and thus you have to watch it just in case, which results in moments like this, moments of pain. But not as painful as the knowledge that this was simply serving as an introduction to a show based on Megamind. And God, this in turn made me so mad, because prior to all of this, the idea of a sequel movie and a TV show? Oh, hype! It had been so long, and Megamind was such a fun and underrated character and story. An excellent parody of the superhero genre that would hit like crack in today's climate. As superhero films have been on the decline recently, and there's an appetite to bash them and point and laugh. But my goodness, how the tables have turned! Because this film was in fact the worst superhero film of this generation. It's got to be one of the worst films released in recent years, and is probably DreamWorks' worst ever movie since the studio was founded. I don't know, maybe Sinbad competes, I can't quite remember. But regardless, it was an embarrassing fumble right here. Defeat from the jaws of victory, that sort of thing. And so yeah, the idea of having to sit through the show on top of that, 8 episodes, each episode going for 20 minutes, if they remained at this quality, which you can expect that they probably would, as it's the same creative team, then it's torture. Watching paint dry. Just no thanks. You might be sitting here thinking, well, if you think it'll suck, why watch? Because I hate myself. Are you happy? Let's get going. Okay, so general thoughts. I actually didn't hate it. Like, was it the best show in the world? No. It was pretty mediocre if we're being perfectly honest, and certainly not up to the standard of Megamind. The original film, not the sequel, my god. But it's a DreamWorks streaming show, and so this is pretty much the level of quality you expect going into these sorts of things. The film was unforgivably bad, but this was just par for the course. And because I came into it with absolutely rock bottom expectations, I think I enjoyed myself more than I originally thought I would. Don't get me wrong, I never want to watch it ever again, but it wasn't the same experience I had watching the movie. Even though this went for far longer all up, it didn't feel that way. And I think a lot of that really has to do with the overall pacing. Since we're dealing with an episodic format, there's a faster conclusion to your storylines, less time to fill with bland, cringy jokes and shit dialogue. And so, the better jokes, the ones that actually make me laugh, they're closer together, because they try to put at least one per episode, so one every 20 minutes. And this makes things a whole lot more enjoyable. Plus, you can take a break after 20 minutes to recharge the battery, so to speak, whilst the movie, you're just sitting there for far too long and just becomes horrific. But that's just the general stuff, right? I better get into the stuff I enjoyed first, shall I? For starters, the theme song is a banger. Like, so much better than it has any real right to be. It is so catchy, it just sticks in your head. Apparently they got Adam Lambert for this song, and apparently he also voices a character in the show. But yeah, the song, damn good. Makes you feel a bit sad though, because, well, why couldn't they put that same energy into securing a good script, good story, good characters? This is like if you get a sloppy-ass cheeseburger delivered to you by a fancy waiter in their nice suit, their bow tie, inside one of those nice metal, what are they called again? A cloche? Anyway, it's like that, excellent presentation at the beginning, only to reveal something rather cheap inside. That's what this song is. It's the really fancy packaging. My god, why does it go so hard? And on top of that, Chum/Minion, despite the voice change, of which I think he's probably the least noticeable, he was in the show, in the story, far more than he was in the movie. And because of this, the show benefits from his presence immensely, because his character is sweet and wholesome and fun. He has good chemistry with all the other characters, and he's funny. He just makes the show better due to his presence. Like, seriously, the way he bounces off characters like Megamind, who normally doesn't even hold a candle to the original version, makes the show far more palatable. And so the episodes where he's the primary character, they're the best ones. Another thing I liked is the story was far more self-contained. You have those individual episodic villains and stories, but in the background there was still more of a story being told to build to the big finale. So you felt like at the end of every episode you had a conclusion. So I ended up getting less bored. And on top of that, I enjoyed it. There was a pretty wide cast of characters, and having more characters in the show, it took time away from Megamind, which was a very good choice. It's very depressing that the main title character is by far the worst character in the show, but, you know, guess that's the creative decision they've gone with. He just ain't it. But yeah, back to Chum. Chum should have been the main character. Let's make a Chum show, a Chum movie. He's by far the best. Although, change his name back to Minion. I'm not sure about Chum. Although, they probably changed it because of Despicable Me and Minions, and they didn't want to get called, you know, copycats. Even though, did this movie come out before that? I don't even remember. Okay, so they came out around the same time, but in the meantime, in the 2010s, the Minions blew up. So they're the Minions now, hence why they changed his name. But yeah, Chum is the best. Chum is number one, and he made the new character, Kaiko, I've forgotten how to say it. Sorry. He made her seem better than she did in the movie, simply because he interacted with her frequently. It allowed her to bring out some more personality and become a little less annoying. Moving on, some of the fights and action, they were good too. Nothing hugely revolutionary, but not distractingly bad either. They're adequate for the type of show we're dealing with, if I'm being honest. But, you know, nothing more than that. Just adequate. Once again, this is a straight-to-streaming spin-off show. I'm not expecting action to compete with stuff like My Hero Academia, or Demon Slayer, or anything of the sort. Although, I guess a man can dream, alright? And so, this leaves us with little else to talk about except the story elements. Like I said earlier, I found the overall quality of the show is much higher than the film, simply due to the way in which the story's paced. It's bite-sized, means less boring filler, but that doesn't mean it's all good. We'll start with the characters. The voices, still shit. Still can't handle that Megamind replacement voice, but like I said earlier, for a TV show, I'll accept the impersonations, but I couldn't handle it for the movie. But on top of that, there's still big story elements that pissed me off. The biggest amongst them being the continued ruination of Megamind and Roxanne Ritchie's dynamic. For some reason, the writers think it's the best thing in the world to retcon the first movie's ending and simply have them function mostly as friends. There's a slight romantic tension that only really crops up in a single episode when they deal with Megamind's jealousy about her reconnecting with a childhood friend. But after that, they have nothing. And I know I went on at length about this in my previous Megamind video, but it just seems like such an epic fail to do this. Like, you want to save something for future seasons, no doubt, but at the same time, it feels like a big part of the reason as to why this new era of Megamind is getting so much hate. Because it fumbles things, just like this. It makes you scratch your head. Like, why would you save this? Save it for the future, because their relationship should have been a key and integral part of the sequel film and now the show. Just like it was an integral part of the first movie, and yet they don't do it. And I think its absence is felt, because a lot of their character interactions feel very empty, sterile, as if they're barely acquaintances, and that's just terrible writing. It's not what you want to see. And it gets to the point that his relationship with Keiko, his new surrogate daughter type figure, felt more fleshed out than the one with his former love interest. It's just woeful. I don't get it. I just don't get it. These are professional screenwriters, for God's sake. On top of that, the villains they used for the most part in this show, they weren't quality. And a lot of them were repeats. So you have the Doom Syndicate member, Nighty Night, as one of the major villains of the first episode. I really like Nighty Night, don't get me wrong, but he is a repeat. The Fish Gang were then the main villains of episode 2. Episode 4 has the very, very deeply tedious Weather Lady villain from the Doom Syndicate. Episode 6 sees them face off with Behemoth from the Doom Syndicate. And 7 and 8 are the Doom Syndicate yet again, but now with a little bit of extra, with the addition of the new overarching villain, Machiavellian. So they felt a bit sameys across the episodes. I felt like it was a bit early to have that many episodes solely following one team of villains, especially when that team of villains is not compelling at all. And so I think the show was at its best in that regard when it had a villain of the week type of deal, with the main villain simply making moves in the background. That's why in terms of story, I think the best 2 episodes are the Cockroach Takeover episode and the Robotic Best Friend episode. But they were in turn weighed down by Megamind being his most annoying and grating and cringe, but not in a good way. Because some episodes do have good Megamind cringe. In episode 1, he tries to become a YouTube sensation and fails miserably. That did make me laugh. But being scared of cockroaches for 20 minutes, following Roxanne around and being jealous with no follow-up, none of that is what you want to see. And so yeah, it was just lame. And in the end, you finish off with the classic and overdone trope of somebody somehow manipulating everybody into thinking that Megamind is now a villain, and thus they need to trust in this random new guy. Even Roxanne believes this shit. Like, come on. And they're using this to set up the return of Metro Man, so I guess that might be a bit of fun, but, seems like it might be too little too late. I doubt it gets a second season if I'm being honest, because it just wasn't that good. Although, considering how quick these things traditionally come out, look at things like Kung Fu Panda Dragon Knight and Dragons the Nine Realms, they probably already have season 2 locked and loaded in the chamber, but we'll see. And so, yeah, the show's not as bad as the film, and if it came along on its own, I'd accept it for what it is. A cheaply made spin-off show. I get it. I'm a How to Train Your Dragon fan. I'm a Kung Fu Panda fan. Those cheaply made, barely canon shows, they're not on the same level, but they're usually a bit of fun. And if the film didn't exist, this would be fine, but that sequel film does exist, and since they tell the same story and are tied together intrinsically, it drags it down by association. Ugh. And so yeah. With all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the show if you've watched it? Do you like it? Hate it? If you haven't watched it, are you going to? Or has this review saved you from a bit of pain? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.